Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Live with Mel. Many in Texas are currently without power. And when I say many, I mean millions. There have been millions of Texans who are currently without power because of a winter storm that came in and swept the southern state. Now, Texas is known for its warm weather. Texas is known for being a warm state with extreme heat and extreme hot weather. But this winter, a freezing storm has came in and caused massive power issues in the southern state. Now, some Texans have been without power for 3 days. They have been in below freezing temperatures for 3 days. Now, on Monday, power plants started to trip. The power began to trip and they tripped off. Now, this unprecedented weather, this unprecedented storm brought snow and ice and freezing temperatures to a state that's used to dealing with warm weather. And while it can get cold in Texas, many Texans are not used to dealing with this snow and weather. And because this snow and weather and these freezing temperatures came in, there was a demand. There was a massive demand for electricity. There was a massive demand for energy and electricity. And unfortunately, because of this massive demand for electricity, the state was unable to handle the massive amount of demands for this. Now, many people believe that Texas should have been able to handle this because they experienced something not too long ago. 10 years ago, there was another freeze in Texas and there were power outages. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't anything to the extreme that we're seeing today, but they did know that Texas could potentially get these freezing weathers. But again, Texas was unprepared for this, and it led to massive blackouts and massive amounts of people in Texas, millions of Texans without electricity. Now, on Monday, about 4.5 million Texans were without electricity. And as we are creeping into the week, as we're moving into the week, people are seeing that electricity is being turned back on in Texas, but 2.9 million people today are still without electricity. 2.9 million people are now in below freezing temperatures without any heat, without anything to keep them warm. Now, I know there's been a lot of controversy surrounding why Texas has no electricity, because like anything else that happens major, there's going to be controversy around it. And they're pointing fingers at many different things. Some people are pointing fingers at wind turbines. Some people are pointing fingers at the fact that Texas is not on the national grid. But a lot of things had to happen in order to have this happen the way that it did. Now, there are a couple things that people are saying. Now, we do know that Texas is the only state that's not on the national grid. And many people are blaming the fact that since Texas is not on the national grid, that is the reason why Texas is currently experiencing blackouts. And one of the reasons why this theory is so prevalent is because of El Paso. Now, El Paso is in Texas. It's a city in Texas, but El Paso was spared from the rolling blackouts. El Paso was spared from losing electricity because it's actually on the national grid. And because it's on the national grid, it is winterized and it's able to deal with winter weather, even though Texas does not get winter weather. And while cities like El Paso was spared, the majority of Texas was not. The majority of Texas saw that they did not have electricity because they were on a grid that was managed by Texas. Now, again, Texas does manage its own electric grid. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas is the company or the body of people who manage the grid, and they were not prepared for this storm. Now, there were several reasons why they think they weren't prepared. For the most part, they think that some plants were down. Texas uses the most electricity during the summer. The summer is when Texas has its peak call for electricity, and many of the plants were going through routine maintenance during this winter storm, which means many of the plants may not have been open and acting on full capacity. And many of these plants were shut down for maintenance to prepare for when electricity would be at its peak demand, which is during the summer. And when that happens, if not all the plants are open and we get a huge spike like they saw this week, it did not have the ability to provide its citizens with electricity. Now, another reason why people are saying that the grid may have went down is because of natural gas. Now, Texas is a state that provides its people with electricity several different ways. You have coal, you have natural gas, and you have wind turbines. And we're going to get to those wind turbines soon because I know there's some interesting theories with the wind turbines. And then going to the comments really quickly, Joanna says, I believe the same thing. I believe it's because they are free from the federal government regulation. Again, many people are saying because they are not on the national grid, so I'll put that comment back up there so you guys can see it. Since they're not on the national grid, they're not subject to the regulations that other people are scheduled to. So they manage it themselves, and this is what's happening. And again, looking at El Paso versus the rest of Texas, we can see that maybe that is one of the theories that's holding up to be true. Now, again, Texas provides Texans with electricity from wind turbines, from coal, and natural gases. Now, wind turbines make up a very, very small percentage during this time. Now, there are times during the year where wind turbines make up a huge, and I mean a huge percentage of how it gives Texans electricity. But during this time, Texans, so the company that manages the electricity or the grid in Texas, said they were not going to rely on wind turbines during this time, and they were going to rely more on natural gas and coal because, again, they use three different ways in order to provide people with electricity. Now, with the natural gas, it's something that does provide a lot of Texas with electricity, especially during these winter months. And when we're in this time period, it usually works well because Texas usually does not get massive amounts of cold weather. They just don't. This is usually a time when it gets cold, but it does not drop the freezing temperatures. And when natural gas is being used, they don't use it to store energy. They pretty much use natural gas, they convert it to energy and then use it right away. Now, when using things like coal, they do store electricity from coal for a very long time. But because of how they use the natural gas to convert to energy and it's not stored, many people are assuming that because there was nothing stored, there wasn't enough electricity being brought to Texas because they didn't have anything in the reserve. They didn't have electricity stored because, again, you don't store it with natural gas. The coal you do, with the natural gas you do not. And another reason, because again, there are several theories circulating right now. I know there's several theories. There's two very popular ones, which is that the wind turbines froze and then about the power grid. But there are other theories because, again, everything had to align perfectly in order to cause this massive blackout in Texas. Now, one of the things that they're saying is that many of the plants probably just didn't work in the cold. Texans are not used to dealing with the cold. Texans are not used to having weathers drop below freezing in many parts of Texas. And because of that, some of the plants are not equipped. They're not winterized. They're not in a position to deal with freezing weather. Now, while they're not in a position to deal with freezing weather, many people are saying that Texas should have been prepared because 10 years ago, they went through something similar. And like I stated at the beginning of the broadcast, while they went through something similar 10 years ago, it was not to the extent that they're seeing now. But Texas does have to do something in order to ensure that this does not happen again, especially at this scale. Now, we see that there are many other states that are going through blackouts as well, but Texas is going through it on a massive scale. Like I stated before, on Monday, 4.5 million Texans were without any sort of electricity. And as we see, many Texans still do not have electricity. 2.9 million Texans as of today do not have electricity. So what do you guys think? Go ahead and write in the comment section below. Let me know what your opinions are. Like I said, there are many different theories floating around. People are blaming wind turbines, which again, Texas was not using wind turbines. They already knew that they were not going to be using a massive amount of energy from wind turbines. So they were planning on using natural gas and coal during this time. So even if the wind turbines did freeze, it wouldn't have caused massive blackouts. Now, again, other people are saying because Texas is not on the national grid, that is why everything failed. That because they're not on the national grid, things are not winterized. It's not regulated by the federal government, and it's not up to par, or it doesn't have the same resources that the national grid has. Now let's go to the comments. So Joanna says, how can they not realize that high demand on their power grid? Summers are killers out there. I'm sure the power grids get hit just as much. Now this is a really interesting comment because they're saying that many of the plants were closing down for maintenance. During the summer, Texas has a massive demand on their power grids during the summer months. And they know that, and they prep for it. And as they're prepping for it, they know they stop blackouts because they know they're going to have this massive demand. Now, since Texas is a southern state and it doesn't get as cold as northern states in the country, usually during the winter months, Texas does shut down certain plants or they temporarily close them down in order to have regularly scheduled maintenance. They work on the power plants during the winter to prepare for the great demand that's going to happen during the summer. But it didn't work out this time because there was a great demand that happened on Monday when this winter storm came. Now, when this winter storm came, something that they did do, and I do want to make sure that we are aware of this as well, is that while the winter storm and the massive demand knocked out many people's electricity, the company, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, again, that's who manages the electricity in Texas, had to shut down, and they had to do what is called rolling blackouts in order to ensure that there wasn't massive damage done to the power grid. So while so the massive amount of demand on the power grids knocked it out, but then you have to go through rolling blackouts is when the company has to go ahead and turn off electricity at certain points of the grid in order to protect the grid from massive damage. And Evelyn, hey, how are you? So Evelyn said, what is Senator Cruz saying? He criticized California before our blackouts, so he must know what happened in Texas. I haven't heard much from Ted Cruz. I'm surprised he's not criticizing things in Texas because he does like to criticize California, but he's not saying anything right now. I do know the one person who is very, very vocal, and he was vocal last night, was Tucker Carlson back on Fox News, and he was, again, mentioning wind turbines, but I have not heard anything from Senator Cruz just yet. So we will see if Cruz comes and criticizes Texas, but many people are criticizing Texas right now. And many people are criticizing Texas because they're not on the national grid. Many people are saying that if they were on the national grid, it would not have been power outage this long or at this high frequency. Again, on Monday, 4.5 million people without electricity. Now, if you live in a winter state, if you live in a state that experiences cold, freezing weathers, you know when there is a blizzard, there is possibility of blackouts, whether you're on the national grid or whether you're on Texas's grid. But people are saying that if Texas was on the national grid, that it wouldn't have happened to this extent. And they're using El Paso as the example because, again, El Paso's in Texas. It's experiencing the same storm, but they were spared from blackouts because they're on a national grid that is winterized. Milan says, hey, how are you? I have family on ground giving me a play-by-play. Ridiculous. So Milan has family in Texas giving her that play-by-play of what's happening. And I know many, many Texans are frustrated right now. Many people are very upset. And here's the next thing. It's not just people in their houses. You're in a state now where people who are the most vulnerable are going to be suffering as well, because Texas is not used to dealing with winter weathers like this. So you have people on the road. You know, there's going to be an increase in accidents. You know that there are homeless people who are living in tents in Texas who are now going to be suffering because they have no place warm to go. And it's going to be very hard to mobilize and ensure that those who are the most vulnerable are taken care of when the state is in disarray like this. So it's not just houses have no electricity. There's a bigger issue here with the winter storms. Neverland says, so sad, there's been 20-some deaths. This should not have happened. And again, this should not have happened. It was preventable. It did happen 10 years ago. Again, there was a freezing weather that happened in Texas 10 years ago, and Texas should have learned. And the reason why El Paso is on the national grid, the reason why El Paso did what it did, and the reason why El Paso still has electricity, unlike the rest of the state, is because they learned from that freeze that happened 10 years ago in Texas. And then Joanna says, sending prayers to the people of Texas, so dangerous to be without heat in those conditions. And it really is. I know we're talking, I know we're arguing, I know people are debating about why this happened or why this didn't happen. There's many different theories going around, and we did touch on a lot of the major theories of why this is happening. But at the end of the day, this is a very sad time for the people of Texas because people do not have electricity. And like Evelyn said, there has been 20 deaths or more right now. And it is something that we do have to keep in mind. And we, like Joanna says, keeping Texas in our thoughts and prayers and hoping that this is handled quickly and swiftly to ensure no one else passes away. No one else dies because of these freezing temperatures. Texas is not equipped to deal with that. So hopefully they have the resources that they need in order to make sure that they can protect Texans. And again, I know we debate. I know people are debating and talking about it. But even if we are debating about why this happened, let's remember that there are human lives at stake. And even if we're going to go back and forth, because again, it's okay to have the conversations and debate why things happen in order to find solutions for things. But please remember there are human lives involved in this as well. And then Joanna says, especially being in lockdown all year because of COVID, sad. And it is sad. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know what you guys think about what's going on in Texas in the comment section below, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching the replay. Let me know what your thoughts are about this massive, massive power outage in Texas. And again, we don't have to agree. We do not have to agree about what caused this. We can talk about it. And the thing about it is your opinion matters. I'll bring you the facts. I'll bring you what's going on, but you have to know that your opinion matters. Whether we agree or disagree, it's okay to come on and have these conversations because these conversations have to happen. And it's important that we continue to have conversations between all sides of the aisle. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you like this show, you'll like my other show as well. It's not about current events like this show, but that show is more about motivating, educating, and empowering you to be your best self. And that show is called The Mel Show. You can watch it on TV, on Apple TV, Roku TV, and Amazon Fire, all on the Easy Way channel. So if you like this show, check out my other show on TV as well. And I come on live every single Monday through Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. So if you guys go ahead, continue to watch the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I can't wait to speak to you guys tomorrow. And again, guys, keep Texas in your thoughts and your prayers, and hopefully they are able to figure out this great situation. Have a great day, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for tuning in.